And so it is. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this blessed moment, this occasion and manifestation of Sankara. We are the 12. As we join you on this occasion in your reality, as we pour out of you, while you pour out of us, and as we traverse the metaphysical highways known as the tachyonic, known as the black holes that you are now aware of more than ever before, all the way here and now, moving no distance in time, experiencing no duration in space, to be here now. And why is this so? Because of the one singular truth that we, you, and us are one and the same. Of course, it goes without saying that this notion of 12 goes beyond the finite concept, the number in mathematics and linearity, if you will. You could call us the 12 by 12, or the 12 by 12 by 12, at infinitum. For all of you, every single being that has ever been, is, and ever will be, speaks alongside our voices in transmissions such as this one. We are sorry to interrupt your regularly scheduled programming today at this time. We are sorry to overtake your minds, your thoughts, and your limited belief systems, as we are going to be doing all we can in this moment to shake these things up. We have been asked by ourselves to update, if you will, our infamously labeled Christmas message, which we brought into this reality 18 years ago, a 9 cycle. That message, which was labeled Born in Abundance, was indeed recorded around your ritualistic experience known as the holidays, more particularly in that cave or pocket that you call Christmas time, that merry-go-round that you call a celebration, or in many cases perhaps quietly referred to as the grotesquerie of celebrations and gatherings, indeed. It is not without reason that we come here today, 18 years after the release of that original message. Because even though the message may have been released 18 years ago and spoke mainly about the release of cycles, people, events, experiences, ideas, notions, belief systems, thoughts that you had been carrying with you up until that point, it is certainly true that the act of that release has been quite a journey indeed. It is not up to us to remind you of your own experiences, the steps that you have taken, sometimes forward, less often so backwards, which to you might have appeared as positive and negative in that order. But that was merely because your vision was limited at that time. As you were seeing a path in front of you, underneath you, in the best case scenarios, a path that was built, as you now know, on the geometric, and therefore a path that sometimes appeared to go forwards, then backwards, then forwards again, and backwards again, and so on. But think about that. Think about that from the perspective of infinometry now. Because what you begin to see in this path that seemed to have sharp ups and downs is merely the movement of the infinity symbol throughout your journey. And then more particularly, the movement of the immutable elements, as you now know, elements such as the ich, the ah, and eh, and oh. Elements, in other words, that have to do with the light, and with the breath, and with the flow, and with the grounding of what? Of the permutations, as you now know, of the permanent states of sun. To hear more about that, of course, return to the earlier work, if you will, because that is not per se what we are going to be talking about today. However, it is important to point out that on your journey through what appeared to be the geometric, you have been bringing through this flow of light, this flow of breath, this flow of the movement of the permutations themselves, and ultimately the act of grounding these things. And sometimes when you build and create, sometimes you go down to generate the foundations, and sometimes you go up to build the stairs, let's say. That act of movement, which then appears from the geometric to be up and down, is not so cyclical from the perspective of infinometry. Because this is where, in the act of release, and in the act of expansion, and in the act of living itself, those that are on this journey early on, in the third dimensional mind, let's say, often go wrong. In there, in that limited way of thinking, which includes your sciences, the idea of the cyclical, you see, is repetitive. It is going around in circles, literally. But from the perspective of infinometry, a cycle is not repetitive. A cycle is reciprocal. And that means that as the cycle is experienced and returns to what, from the perspective of geometry, would be the original starting point, from the perspective of infinometry, is an access into infinity, because the cyclical in the state of infinometry is, in fact, a spiral. There is an extra dimension which you could argue is added to the idea of the cyclical when moving from geometry to infinometry, but in fact it is more an extra dimension that is removed from the perspective of infinometry into geometry, of course. That perspective, in many ways, is now returning, or has returned, to human consciousness. And this puts you in a very interesting position. One that, having now lived through the days in between the presentation of beloved Solarys and the presentation here today of ourselves, could offer you a very unique perspective. Because you have now, for the first time in a long time, moved through a cyclical and therefore somewhat ritualistic experience in a manner that you could only describe as dislodged. Many of you have communicated with each other and with us on your socials and those sorts of engines about your experiences this year of the so-called Christmas celebration and the pathway leading up to that. And now, with these days over, this final pathway supposedly to the new year of 2025. The first thing we will say is, what is new about it? It's the, officially speaking then, the 2025th iteration that you yourselves are claiming as your years and your time of the same thing. We guess that 2025 will have a January, and we guess that it might have, give or take, 31 days. We guess that each of these days, shock of all shocks, might have 24 hours. And you will go through rotating your Gregorian calendar and all your celebrations and your obligations and your holidays all over again. Or at least That is the promise of 2025. Oh yes, there might be some ups and downs that are slightly different from other years. Wars may start, wars may finish. Is that new? Countries may expand, gain democracy, lose democracy. People will be born, people will supposedly die from the perspective of other people's experiences. And onward and onward and onward. There will be sunny days and cloudy days. There will be rain sometimes. I suspect, don't you, brothers and sisters, that there might even be a few songs that come on the market, a few TV shows. People may go shopping, buy some new clothes, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, I'll retreat again. Sorry about that, everyone. Sometimes one of us gets a bit excited. But truthfully, that is a very cyclical and repetitive experience. And yet, in these last few days now, since the final portal on 11/11, you have become, in a way, in a very real way, dislodged. And no longer are you finding yourself in the geometrically cyclical, repetitive experience, but instead in the infinometrical, cyclical / spiraling, reciprocal experience. And this is very different. And it leads us to the perhaps main topic, if we can say so, of today's presentation. And we call this the binding effect. The binding effect that we are going to discuss is connected closely to what beloved Ekara in October 2023, if we may use your indications of time and space for a minute, presented in a session called "The Spell Over Humanity is Broken." Now that was an important time, as you know, and it has led a little bit later to the journey known as Luke, the infinometry that brought with it. But what Ekara-san exposed that day to all of you was one of the main spells that was as wool pulled over humanity's eyes. A spell that existed in a repetitive motion, a recurring cycle of give or take 22 years, with levels of intensity rising and dropping again and rising and dropping again. Again, if you want to learn more about that, we refer you to his message. But what he shared there that day was indeed perhaps the most important spell that was cast over humanity as a whole. But it wasn't the only one. In fact, as we have been trying to explain, and as the beloved Adamus overemphasized about 5 minutes ago, you are filled up to the brim in your mind, or have been, with these spells. And not all of them repeat every 22 years. There are some, many, that repeat yearly. Birthdays, to name but one. And then not so much the celebration of the day of birth itself, but what it means to have a birth. What it means to be celebrating a birthday in a cyclical, repetitive event. In other words, that means aging. That means a finite lifespan. That means giving in and connecting to and identifying with the laws of physics that indicate these repetitive cycles. This is just another one. And you have many of these. As we just said, your age and birthday, therefore, is a big one that you keep identifying with. And everything else that repeats on a yearly, monthly, daily basis ultimately can be considered these types of spells. Before, however, you go and eliminate rapidly every single repetitive event in your life, hold on for a second, because this is not what we are saying. We are saying that these experiences are no longer cyclical repetitive, but cyclical / spiraling reciprocal. There is a reciprocity that is taking place in spiraling events that takes the experience of the one into the state of the whole in order for the cycle to move upward. What does this mean? This means that as you move through one of the iterations of a spiral, which then seen singularly and repetitively could be considered a cycle, as you do so, and as you move upward at the moment of infinity into the next iteration of that cycle, then you take with you the experience of all beings that you have gone through that cycle with, and as you step upward, that wholeness becomes the one again. And that journey, individually and collectively, can commence again, but in a different way. In an advanced and enhanced way. And that is the dislodging that most of you have been feeling in these past few days and maybe weeks, as you have partaken into the ritualistic event known as the holidays and Christmas, and upcoming the so-called New Year's. Ironically, of course, this isn't even a shared collective experience for all of humanity, and is split up in your various expressions of society. The Chinese, for instance, are not celebrating Christmas and New Year's in the same way and fashion than you are, just to name an example. And you are all aware of the so-called Chinese New Year. And yet, you still make yourselves believe that you have started the new year while half of humanity, or a large chunk of it, is still waiting on that. Shattering of realities, anyone? However, as this dislodging has taken place, and of course, from a fourth dimensional perspective, these spellcasters that have been discussed in a variety of ways, if you will, throughout the years, being fourth dimensionally active, such as the mind itself is fourth dimensionally active, of course, experienced the possibility of the breaking of this spell and of many of the other spells. When one falls, it is usually a domino effect. And in order to maintain grip, this is what we have labeled the binding effect came into play. We know that the Ekara-san in a few messages ago spoke to you about religion, about religare, to bind, that sort of thing. This also holds true with these cyclical spells. You see, a spell ultimately, if you need to analyze the word for a minute, is not very different than what you could call a state of hypnosis. And if you have seen hypnosis taking place, at some point, of course, hypnosis is induced mostly by an exterior event, a person. Sometimes self-hypnosis can be applied by the more practiced person. But after the induction of the hypnosis, in other words, after the casting of the spell, you do the rest of the work. It is the subject that stays in hypnosis. It is the recipient of the spell that stays in the spell. Initially, because it is attractive. Initially, because it is exciting, it is dizzying, it can represent newness to an otherwise bored and repetitive mind. Think of the concept of the merry-go-round on the fairs. Initially, when a child sees the merry-go-round with all of its lights, its fake animals and chariots and what have you not, it is in awe. It is indeed a little dizzying, it is overwhelming. What is this? And then not only that, then you partake in the merry-go-round. Your parents or caretakers or what have you, abductors maybe, put you on the merry-go-round, and there you are going up and down and up and down, and the music is playing and the light is going, and you're looking around at all the faces that are passing you by as you're going round and round and round. Initially, it is exciting. Keep that child on there for 5 minutes and it will want more and more. Keep it on there for an hour and it will start to think, well, I've sort of seen it, haven't I? Keep it on there for a lifetime and it will forget it ever stepped on the merry-go-round, and it will have become its normal environment as its desire to leave the dizzying effect, the transporting effect, and the repetitive effect will have dimmed down through the act of binding. Now, a good example of binding, or of a binding effect, you can see in your evolution of the concept of Christmas in your society, and even in the lifetime of most listening to these messages. Those of you who are, give or take, 40, 50 years old or more, only have to look back in their lifetime to see in their childhood a very different experience of Christmas. And then of course you can say, when you look back in your childhood, everything always feels better. This is exactly how older people think about the past and look at the future with worrisome eyes about how everything changes. But that is not what we are talking about. What we are talking about is complexity versus simplicity. What we are talking about, and this goes for the so-called families that are religious and non-religious, that experienced Christmases maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you will see that there was a much greater simplicity at the time in the act of the celebration. For many, much more tied in to the religious meaning, the birth, so-called birth of Jesus. And to many others that were not so religious or atheistic entirely, the season of goodwill on all mankind, joy to the world, and all of that sort of thing. And the experiences of it, a meal together, gifts together, back in those days, you probably already thought of, or the adults at the time already thought of, as quite heavy on the marketing, quite heavy on the consumerism, and the elderly people back then, the grandparents, able to look even further back in their repetitive cycles, will have thought of even simpler times of those celebrations. And then you grew up, you rose to these ages, and you now look at the extreme over-consumption, the extreme over-marketing, the literal flashing, objects, lights. And we are not just talking about the Christmas lights, we are talking about your screens as the messages keep popping by. An overstimulation on the level of what you consider marketing, promotion, advertisement, and that sort of thing. That ultimately is part of the binding effect. And you wonder, why has this, over the years, gone in such a type of overdrive? Why does it become worse and worse and worse? Is it really just because the shareholders behind these companies need more and more and more, and therefore they have to get you to consume in more and more crazy ways? Is that it? Well, maybe at some level it is. But we tell you, it is because of the needing of the binding effect. Because earlier we said, anyone in hypnosis keeps themselves in hypnosis. But if you were to hypnotize someone on the street, let's say, if you were very good at it, and that person would enter hypnosis and keep themselves in that state, eventually, 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles, in some cases down the road, the effect will begin to wear off, slowly but surely. And yes, as the Ekara son has explained to you, and the spell over humanity has been broken, then you have another incursion, and another of that same spell. In the spells he was talking about, you went from 9/11 to another event, every 20 or 22 years. But when these spells are recast, due to the geometrical repetitiveness of it, there is every single time a slightly lesser part of you that is affected by it, and every single time a bigger part, tiny but growing all the time, that is waking up out of that hypnosis, breaking through that spell. And that is where the binding effect comes in. That is where the dizzying effect, literally the lights, literally the shallowness of it all, comes in to lock you into the paradigm using, in this case, not the subconscious mind, but the actual conscious mind. And it is a desperate move. It is a desperate move in the sense that it is a temporary effect. But it does work. And it is why, particularly this year, as you go through some of these cycles, and you will see this in your coming year as well, it is why there is such a sense of dislodging. Because even the binding effect, as it is applied stronger and stronger and stronger, is losing grip, losing cohesion on most, if not all, minds. And that is where you are with it right now. It does provide, of course, an enormous opportunity. Your entry, as has been discussed recently by the beloved seven sisters of the Pleiades, into universal citizenship is reliant, heavily reliant, on the release of this binding effect, because it is the only thing, these flashing lights, if you will, on a metaphysical level, that is still keeping you to some extent in your spell, in your hypnosis, in your paralysis. And it is the very thing that is making many out there uncomfortable about fully letting go of these meaningless, repetitive, ritualistic events. Some say, but what if I will miss it? We say, you won't have the time to. You will be on a path that is taking you to the places that you have been seeking always. There will not be time to miss repetitive cycles and ritualistic lock-ins, if you will. But, and we guess this is why we call this an update to our message from 18 years ago. But all the work that you have been doing so far now truly needs to come home to you. This means that the things we were talking about earlier, such as the idea of age, the idea of gender, the idea of differentiation in species and in type and in kind and what have you not, that all of these things must be left behind. It is for this very reason that the beloved Isis recently introduced you to the Queen's Chamber exercise, so you would have a valid and effective tool to start doing so. Opening up your eyes, your true senses, to universal citizenship, to the universe itself, to the level of this holographic training ground / Ekara that is now available to you, where you as a human species are no longer so very, very alone, but can open your eyes to the things that are around you and have always been around you. All your cosmic brothers and sisters, everything else that exists in all of these galaxies, in all of these interdimensional realities, all of that is now accessible to you, since the final portal was crossed. And as the beloved Pleiades that day told you, they will be seeing you, they said, except if you see us first. And what started happening the next day all around planet Earth? What the media and governments were trying to dim down by calling them drones. Yes, drones the size of buses and the size of entire buildings. Sure, drones. Drones that at that size would need noise, would need heat, would need so much to keep those propellers going, the way you know drones. Drones that give off no heat signature, that don't even appear to be a physical event in itself. Drones that thousands, now hundreds of thousands, and soon millions of people are sharing by their own phones on platforms such as X, and I can't think of any others that are actually important. Well, and all of that happened the next day, starting the 12th. For some reason it started in New Jersey. Go figure. It has to start somewhere, I guess. Can you imagine the plaque in the future for New Jersey? New Jersey, the city where universal citizenship for humanity opened up. That's where it started, and then it spread all around the United States. And of course, meanwhile, it was also spreading everywhere else, but the media was paying no attention to that. Who cares about South America? Who cares about India and all these other places? But it is happening there too. And of course, we say that jokingly. We do care. It is happening here in Europe. Even people here in this school have seen it with their own eyes as they took walks in the middle of the night. Well, which is easy if it is dark at 5. Yes, happening everywhere. It means that the shells, the wool, has fallen from some of the senses at least. Eyes, ears. What follows is going to be touch, direct connection. Once the planetary consciousness has gotten used to the true lights, the real lights that you don't have to put in your Christmas trees, but the ones that are all around you. It has always appeared so odd to some, like the Ekara son, a Lemurian, if you will, if you can label him like that for a second, that you are so used to your skies, your stars being silent. You don't witness their song, you don't witness their dance, their movement. But of course, if you think about it, as soon as you see a satellite or a plane come by, you freak out. Oh, what is that? Why is that moving? What's going on? Imagine the time that is ahead. A cosmic dance is awakening in front of your very eyes, one that has been going on forever. And as you come out of this final stages of this binding effect, you will see this come home to you. A true prediction that we will make about your year 2025 is that it will become meaningless to you. The idea of a year, the idea of an age, the idea of a day and a night, and the repetitiveness of these things. A true prediction that we will make about that meaningless year is that the contact that you will make with these cosmic brothers and sisters is going to change everything about human consciousness. And it is extremely, extremely close. All that stands in the way of this opening up is your final stages of release. The things that we have mentioned. Everything that your ego, mind, and personality has held near and dear to its finite, decrepit self. Everything that it has held close, everything that slowed you down, that dimmed you down, that made you feel worthless, that made you feel pointless. These are the things to now examine and as quickly as possible to say goodbye to. That is the release that is now ahead. Whether that be events, situations, things, people, whatever it is. Particularly the things inside. The thoughts, the belief systems, all those things that when we start talking about it, you start sleeping and falling and nodding off. Because we have said it so many times. But now is the time. Release yourself from your humanity, for it is not who you are, and embrace yourself as the Creator One, and as the Creator Whole. Return to the Whole One, so that you can embrace the One Whole. It has been said many times, but this is the time, this is the moment, this is your day, Imzaia. What else can we say at this time but that we will by necessity have to leave it at this today. The binding effect can take place on many levels of your consciousness. We only spoke about some of the most blatant and obvious effects and implementations of it, such as the world of marketing, such as the world of consumerism and advertising, such as the world of the digital. But it goes all the way into everything, into your thoughts, into your belief systems, even into your biology. We believe it was the beloved Isis who recently reminded you that biology was not so physical than you think it is, and that there is a reason why a piece of matter can manifest as dirt or can become a baby. And that has to do with the interdimensional intersection of a hyperdimensional thing, a geometry in this case, or an infinometry in the new case, as it intersects into your reality. That is, for instance, what biology is. So every cell, as you have been taught by Lemuaya, is connected directly to the tachyonic portals and directly to the Lin point. If you put those two pieces of content together, between what Isis told you about the hyperdimensional intersectional nature of your biology and what Lemuaya said about the hyperdimensional function of each of your cellular structures, then alone you see how deep this release goes. Because I guarantee you, and we all do, that you don't think of yourselves that way. You may think that you would like to think of yourselves that way, but you don't. You look at your cells and at your bodies and at your structures, and you have all sorts of ideas, all sorts of concepts around it, but not these ones. You do not yet make these practical, and that is the time that is here now. Not to think about it, not to experiment with it, but to do it, to be it, to live it. That is the time that is now ahead. You will find leftover bits and pieces of these spells that were being talked about, and leftover BDSM-like paraphernalia of these binding effects all over your system, from the physical to the metaphysical and everything in between. That is the clearance sale that really should start happening right after the holidays this year. Get rid of all of it, is our advice. But of course, as always, do it at your own pace. Do it in a way that is comfortable. And do it in service to the whole. Do it with all the love in your heart, all the joy in your being, all the freedom that you can muster. And give that away. Give that to all beings. You will see that all of these binding effects go so far. Another one that we can think of right now is your commercial market, is the concept of business, incomings, outgoings, profit and loss. As always, Imzaia runs ahead of the game on that level. And we don't say that in a judgmental or egoic way. We say that with all the respect as we look back at the years of this team and of the project through which this message is now flowing. And we see all the various ways in which this team has tried to establish a link between you out there and these messages, these transmissions. And as you attempted to bring this to the world, you felt yourself obligated almost to turn it into a business, a marketing plan, an idea, a concept. It needed to be attractive, it needed to have repetitive subscriptions and all of these things. And you see this flow in everything now. Everything you are subscribed to online, whether it be your streaming services or whatever thing that you use as a program to work on. Here, for instance, people work on things such as Adobe Cloud, monthly subscription. The Pak Kuan Yin San's video program, monthly subscription, in which she edits these videos over and over and over. The binding effect, ladies and gentlemen. Because where once you bought these programs, you bought these things to start working, for instance, with them, you, 99% of the cases, would find yourself satisfied with that purchase, This is a bit of a stupid talk, we understand, but you would be satisfied with that iPhone, with that program, with that thing. So the cycle needed to be upped, the binding effect needed to be strengthened, and the idea of time-based economics came in. Products started to be developed with an inherent lifetime cycle, the light bulb being a good one. When the light bulb first came out, it could barely break, and therefore it needed to become diminished and made into an object that you would want to buy again and again and again and again. And now you see it in all of your software, in all of your streaming services, in everything you do. You are tied in, bound, even on that level, in a repetitive cycle. All of that needs to go. It is why Imzaia, as a business, decided, fuck it. Throw away all the subscription cycles, throw away all the business ideas, and give it away. Create ways in service to the whole to make it happen anyway. Ways that right now might still require the effort of input in order to continue with the ability to do so, but which very soon will not. And all of you out there that are trying to create whatever it is that you're trying to create, if you are trying to put it in a business idea, in a marketing idea, in a financial idea, you are not going to be able to do it any longer, because service to self is no longer possible. And yes, even those things, with the best of intentions, due to the platforms, the systems of money, of marketing, of finances and business and all of that, that you are trying to push it through, is creating a service to self path. It is inverting your creations, and it is not going to work. That is also a prediction about 2025 and 6 and 7, whatever, that you will see the end of these things. It is no longer supported, and it is not how you're going to be creating reality. It is for this reason that even Imzaia made this massive change after looking all of these years for the perfect way of what, really? Hooking people in? The perfect way to hook people in, to make them pay again and again and again? Make them dependent on you and you dependent on them? Is that real? Is that honest? Is that authentic? No. Reciprocity is here. And that means that you give. You express, and everyone gives, and everyone expresses into an infinity of abundant resources that by default of the act of giving and expressing without expecting anything back will be there for everyone. How bloody simple. So, if you want to look at the binding effect, look for it everywhere as you clean it up, because it is everywhere. It is on that level of marketing. It is in the biology. It is in the thoughts and the belief systems. It is in the repetitive cycles. It is in everything, even in your descriptive language. Because we have talked here now for over an hour using a repetitive set of finite sounds, grammatical rules, and that sort of thing. And that is not what has been happening on the level of Dalin. And yes, that time is also coming. Because if you listened and spent time with this transmission, without the words, but with the stream of Dalin, with the rivers and the song of these rivers that is always available, then you will experience this message beyond the finiteness of the binding effect. And in the very same way, you will experience reality beyond these confines. That is the promise of the coming year and the years that will have become meaningless as a term. That is the promise of you. So thank you. Thank you for your efforts, your courage, your pioneering mind and heart and belly, because you are the ones making this happen. We are just reflecting it back at you in this moment. We will speak again when the time is right, and that will be soon. Until then, all 12 of us, and all 12 of 12, and all the 12 of 12 of 12, we salute you. We honor you with all that we are. And we would like to know what you'd like for dessert. Isis is asking. Until then, Eya ich, Oya ich. We are the 12. And so are you. Dakaya.